Who are the biggest winners and losers following the New York Giants 2025 NFL Draft? We look at that and more on today's Locked On Giants podcast coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work, and we've got a lot of it over there on New York Giants on SI. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week, which I'll be revealing later in the show. All right, on today's Locked On Giants podcast with the New York Giants 2025 draft in the book, we're going to take a look at the winners and the losers as a result of the draft. And then we're going to wrap things up with a look ahead. I've got some thoughts that I want to just kind of throw out, some random thoughts that came to me as I was, making my notes up for this show. So that's our topic list for today. And again, welcome on into everybody. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with the winners, people who are going to benefit from the 2025 draft class. And we'll start off with the obvious one, Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, the outside linebackers. Now, how are they winners in this, considering that Abdul Carter, of course, would be the guy that is the reason why they are winners? How do they benefit? For the simple reason that amongst the things that Abdul Carter is probably going to be asked to do for the Giants, at least early on, he's going to spell those guys, all right? So when they need a breather, he's going to come in, Abdul Carter is, and he's going to relieve some of them. Now, that is important. Why? Because last year, if you remember, Brian Burns in particular played all the snaps. The guy was banged up by the end of the year. I still don't know how he made it through the season, given what he was dealing with. So a guy like Abdul Carter can come in, and there will be absolutely no drop-off if he has to come in for Burns or for Thibodeau. All right. So this isn't a situation like how last year, whenever Dexter Lawrence came off the field, opponents went right at the spot that he vacated. No. Opponents aren't going to be able to do that now when Carter comes on the field. And that includes not just in terms of pass rush, that also includes run defense. So there should be absolutely no drop off there. So that's going to benefit Thibodeau and Burns, who should theoretically be able to play fewer snaps, stay fresher throughout a game and throughout a long season. And just, there's no downside to adding Abdul Carter into that mix, having him part of a rotation at first. And even as the season goes on, and of course, there will be packages developed specifically for Abdul Carter to join in. And who knows, maybe by year's end, maybe he's more of a starter. Maybe he replaces Thibodeau. Who knows? That's always a possibility. But for the time being, Thibodeau and Burns benefit from having Abdul Carter in the lineup because there's not going to be a drop-off. They don't have to worry if they have to ask for, a breather in the course of a game. Okay, next up on the winners list, people who are going to benefit because of the draft class. Dexter Lawrence. The all-world nose tackle. I just mentioned him before. Every time he has come off the field, teams have gone right at his spot, and they have had success. Well, that hopefully will stop this year. Besides the fact that the Giants added a bunch of veteran defensive linemen, they've also added Darius Alexander, the third-round draft pick. Now, Darius Alexander, position flexibility, versatile. He can play the nose tackle if need be. Now, obviously, It's too soon to say if, there's going to be a drop off. If I'm being honest with you, I haven't really done a whole lot of work on his film just yet. But that being said, the Giants have now a guy who potentially can come in for Dexter Lawrence when he needs a breather and hopefully not have a drop off. Darius Alexander, I think, is, just based on the scouting report that I was able to get my hands on, I think he's going to be a good fill in for Dexter Lawrence if they need him to. Now, of course, they also have other guys that can come in. We saw last year Jordan Riley tried to plug in that nose tackle spot. But I think Darius Alexander is an upgrade, and Dexter Lawrence now is at a point where he's getting up there in age. Not that old, but he's been around now for a while. He's played a lot of snaps over his career. You want to keep him fresh because he's a guy you want down the stretch in games and also down the stretch in the season. You don't want to see him wear down. You don't want to see him get injured. And I think having the depth is going to be key to keeping Dexter Lawrence fresh and on the field. All right, another one who's a winner. Generally speaking, the defensive backs. All right, so that would be Deontay Banks, Paulson Adebo, and safeties Tyler Nubin and Javon Holland. Why? Again, I'm going to go back to Abdul Carter, right, and that pass rush and the front seven in general. The Giants really put a lot of emphasis on the front seven, just getting that front seven up to snuff, creating a nice depth rotation, if you will, to keep those guys fresh. But more importantly, when you have a fearsome front seven, that makes life on the back end incredibly easy for the defensive backs. Now, remember, that defensive back group, although they're all technically veterans, they're still kind of young. They still haven't really played together. It's going to take time for them to kind of gel, if you will, back there. So the defensive front is going to help that group because if they can move quarterbacks off his spot, if they can force quarterbacks to throw the ball before he's ready to do so, if they could force some errant throws, that is going to make life so much easier for the defensive backs. I mean, how many times last year or in years past did we see the pass rush just barely miss out on getting to the quarterback? Probably a little too often, I would say, for anyone's liking. So again, having Abdul Carter in there, adding Darius Alexander in there, adding the veterans that they picked up in free agency, that is going to be a big, big help for the Giants' defensive backfield. All right. Another guy who I think is a winner is defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. Now, Bowen, as y'all know, he was a guy that last year I was kind of, tapping the table saying that he should be fired. Having thought about it, having gone back and looked at things, Bowen, for as good as he might have been in Tennessee, and I know some people will say, well, was that Mike Vrabel that, his system that they were running, or was that Bowen? Bowen did not have the same personnel, or the same type of personnel, I should say, with the Giants that he had in Tennessee. And if you think back to the Hard Knocks series the year before, Joe Shane, the general manager, basically told Shane Bowen in one of the episodes, look, man, I'm going to get you Brian Burns, but that's really all you're going to get. Well, this year, Shane Bowen got a lot on defense, right? Not just in the draft, but also in free agency. So the hope is that now he's got the type of personnel he needs in order to run the defense that he wants to. So Shane Bowen is definitely a winner because he's got pieces to choose from. It's just a matter of, do they develop those pieces and get the most out of them? And just, again, Abdul Carter alone is going to give Shane Bowen levels of the defense that he probably did not have in the last year. All right. Carter can serve as a spy for the defense against the quarterback. He can, be a pass rusher. He can drop into coverage. He can play the run. I mean, there's so many things he can do. And it's just, really the Giants defense is going to be limited based on any limitations that Shane Bowen's creativity places on the team. So Bowen, definitely a winner. Okay. I'm going to give you one more. And this one's kind of, out of left field, but I think this is applicable. Lawrence Taylor. Yes, the great LT. Why is he a winner? Well, besides the fact that the man is just awesome and probably the best football player I think I have ever seen in my entire life, I really got to give Lawrence Taylor kudos for how he handled Abdul Carter's request, if you will, for number 56. All right, that's a number, in my opinion, that should not be touched. That's a sacred number. Okay, no Giant should ever wear that number again. And it's funny because on my X account, I actually said, the NFL has never retired a number league wide the way MLB and the NHL and the NBA have done. And I asked people, I said, if you could pick one number that the NFL should retire league wide, what would it be? And a lot of people said 56. I wouldn't have a problem with that. 56 was a number, 12 was a number for Tom Brady. But certainly you look at Lawrence Taylor and how he changed the game, how the position was played. You can make a good case for that. But anyway, why is LT a winner? Basically, the advice he gave to Abdul Carter in rejecting his requests to unretire the number. He basically told Abdul Carter, look, man, I don't care what number you pick a number that's not 56, that's not retired, and create your own legacy. And I just thought that was such sage advice from Lawrence Taylor. And I've got to give the man kudos because, he wasn't snotty about it. He didn't say, "What are you kidding me? Who are you?" He was wise. He counseled the young man. From what I understand, they had a really good meeting when they met on the Saturday, the third day of the draft. So I got to put Lawrence Taylor in the winner column for this one, just based on those factors alone. Now, who are the losers from the 2025 Giants draft? I'm going to get to that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip off gets closer, and their last minute deals can save you up to 60%. Game Time's all in pricing means there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you're going to pay. Whether you're looking for tickets to sports events, theater, comedy, concerts, or whatever, Game Time has you covered. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up this week on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'm booking some guests to come on to talk about the Giants draft picks. I know I'm going to have Richie Bradshaw, who covers Arizona State. So he's going to come on. We're going to talk about Cam Scattebo. And I have some others in the works. So as soon as I have that schedule set, I know Gene Clemens, I'm trying to get Coach Gene on the show. I know a lot of you asked me about him. So we're hopefully going to work out a time when he can come on for the entire show. So just so much coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast, because it's always nice to hear from those who cover these prospects for, a lot longer than I had so far at any rate, and get their take on these players. So anyway, that's what's coming up on Locked On Giants. Let's get back to our program. We're going to take a look at the losers from the 2025 Giants draft class. And folks, we've got to start with quarterback Tommy DeVito. All right. Tommy's a great guy. He is a hometown hero, a success story, a tremendous kid. But look, let's be real here. The selection of Jackson Dart's going to be quarterback 3 to start the year. The Giants aren't keeping 4 quarterbacks, okay? So, unless Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or God forbid Dart, if any of those guys get hurt, then maybe DeVito stays. But no, as far as like the long term, this is probably it for DeVito. All right. That doesn't mean he can't go on and find another team and maybe have a career with another team, but it's kind of obvious that the Giants initially they re-signed him because he was an exclusive rights free agent, so therefore an easy renegotiation for them. And DeVito just he doesn't have a long term future with his team. Again, great guy. When that happens, I wish him well, but it is what it is. It's going to be Wilson, Winston, and Dart at the quarterback spot. All right, another loser, and I'm going to group these into one. Eric Gray and Dante Miller, the running backs. Okay, thanks to the arrival of Scattebo, Cam Scattebo eventually is going to be RB2. He's going to displace Devin Singletary. Now, Singletary right now, the reason why I didn't include him in the losers group is because Singletary is probably going to be RB2 to start. And the reason I say that is because one of the big adjustments a running back coming out of college needs to make is he has to be able to pass block. All right. Scattebo, we'll see if he can pass block. Preseason is going to tell us a whole lot. But right now, I would say he's probably penciled in at RB3, if I had to take a guess. That means one of Gray and or Miller, if not both, potentially could be out of a job. All right. Now, you could say, well, what about Miller as a return specialist and Gray has done returning as well? Well, they've got Emir Smith-Marset to do that. And while it's not a bad idea to have a backup, I could see maybe another young player emerging for that role. So I'm not so sure if Eric Gray and or Dante Miller have a future with the Giants at running back. All right. Another guy who you could say is a loser as a result of the draft, Evan Neal. Now, as if it wasn't apparent before, with the signing of Stone Forsythe and James Hudson to play backup tackle, the Giants bring in Marcus Bowe in the draft. Marcus Bowe, according to head coach Brian Dable, is going to get work at tackle. That means, in case it wasn't clear before, that Evan Neal is going to move to guard. All right, like I've been saying all along, he is going to move to guard. Now, here's the problem for Evan Neal. Marcus Bowe can also play guard. There is Jake Kubas, who has been cross-training at center. They have Greg Van Roten, who they brought back, who can play guard and center. So, if the theory that the more you can do on an offensive line, the better is true, Evan Neal, his days as a tackle probably are done. And, unless he successfully makes that conversion to guard and can displace Van Roten, who is currently the incumbent, I don't see a role for Evan Neal for the long term on this team. And, I forgot to mention Joshua Zudu, who is also going to be in the mix for guard. Right. So that's some steep competition. And I just don't know that, Evan Neal, hopefully he makes it. I know he works at it, but I can't see the Giants at this point, who, as I mentioned in another show over the weekend, they declined Evan Neal's fifth-year option, and I just can't see him having a long-term future with his team. Maybe the Giants look to trade him to get him a fresh start. I don't know. I know some of you are going to say, well, what could they possibly get for him? Maybe a fresh start is what he needs. He's not a bad run blocker, but it just has not worked out here for the Giants for many reasons, not just what we see on the field, but also from some stuff maybe behind, the scenes. But Evan Neal definitely did not benefit from this Giants draft class. And I'm going to give you one more. This might be a tad bit of a stretch, but I'm going to throw it out there for what it's worth. Micah McFadden, I have down as being a loser as a result of the draft. Now, why? Micah McFadden is in no danger of losing his starting inside linebacker job in the base defense. Where he is potentially in danger of losing his job is if Abdul Carter replaces him in certain packages. Again, Micah McFadden, pretty good run stopper, but Abdul Carter can do a lot more, and he has experience. Played at inside linebacker for the first couple of years of his college career, so I could see Abdul Carter ultimately displacing Micah McFadden in certain packages. Right now, Micah McFadden again, he's in the final year of his contract. I do not think the Giants will renew that contract. The Giants also have Darius Mawaso. So if, Micah McFadden moves on after this year, which is a pretty good possibility that he will, maybe Darius Mawaso becomes the starter or one of the starters moving forward. And then again, you have Abdul Carter who can come in and be the specialist, if you will, at inside linebacker. So that's a bit of a stretch. I know that, but it's something still to be considered. All right, coming up next, some final thoughts as we look ahead after the Giants' fairly successful 3-day draft. So please don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, the Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart and the guy that we believe showcases the strength and power needed to push the New York Giants forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear cut Player of the Week is Arizona running back Cam Scattebo. The 5'11", 216-pounder is a human bowling ball who is going to bring the Thunder back to a Giants ground game that has lacked the quality for years. Scattebo has made a name for himself as a dual weapon, from picking up the tough yards after contact to knocking over defenders looking to slow him down as a receiver out of the backfield. He'll even give the Giants snaps on special teams, making his value to the Giants well worth the investment. The energetic and outgoing Scattebo is brimming with confidence as he gets set to go forth and conquer, just like the all-new Nissan Armada and their other vehicles that are ready to go forth and conquer the road ahead. Take the Nissan Armada Rogue or Pathfinder and go find your next adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We're talking Giants winners and losers after the NFL draft. And in this segment, just some final thoughts that, popped into my head as I was putting this together. So let's, just start off with the key, all right? Now, the key with this draft class, as with any draft class, is going to be how well the coaching staff develops this group. All right. Now, last year, we all know the Giants got a lot of mileage out of their draft class. The development was there. In the past, I don't think we could say that draft picks under this regime, at least for the first couple of years, with maybe a few exceptions here and there, we can't really say that the development blossomed to the point where these guys that they drafted went on to become guys that you didn't have any questions about. So developing these guys into contributors, whether it be in a starter's role or a sub package role, whatever it might be, they've got to get these guys up to snuff. And you want to see them get better and better each week, just like you want to see the team get better and better each week. If these guys don't develop, if we're asking questions about whether they made the right decision, in weeks 17, week 18, we got a problem. All right. But on paper, the Giants draft class looks pretty darn good. It's just now a matter of getting them to play, up to their potential. All right. I mentioned Shane Bowen earlier in the program as being a winner. Shane Bowen, in my mind, is on the hot seat this year, in addition to obviously Brian Dable and Joe Shane, who need for everything to click. But I say Shane Bowen is on the hot seat because he's got now a variety of personnel. He got a lot of personnel from front to back. if he can't come up with creative ways to use this personnel, if he can't come up with a way to make this defense a top 10 unit, then what are we doing here? Maybe it's time to rethink the direction and the man, running this defense. All right. Now, I think Shane Bowen will pull it all together. He'll get the unit, doing some good things. At least that's my hope. But if he doesn't, I think we have to reopen or revisit the question of whether or not the Giants made a mistake to retain him as defensive coordinator. Okay, one last thought I want to mention before we call it a show. For the first time, and I can't explain why I feel this way, but it's just based on things that were said going back to the end of last season, and maybe because this all came out in media sessions and whatnot. But I really feel like the Giants front office was all on the same page from start to finish during the key parts of the roster building season. Now, what do I mean by that? You start with John Mara's comments about, look, I want to, see us get the franchise quarterback. I want to see us improve the offensive line. I want to see us improve the defense so that, opponents aren't running up and down the field on us. These are all areas that the Giants attacked. And whether or not they're successful with what they did, that remains to be seen. We need to see games, obviously. But I just feel like, given what we saw in years past, like, for example, we would watch the offensive line and we would say, why are they doubling down on forcing square pegs into, round holes? Or why don't they address this position? I feel like, lessons were learned, for lack of a better way to put it, like everybody's on the same page. Like finally, the front office kind of saw what a lot of us have been screaming about regarding the deficiencies of this team. Now, that's not to say that they listen to us, because they never do. But I just feel like, the Giants finally opened their eyes as to where they had shortcomings, and they did something about it. And I'll leave you with this last thought. I said all along, given what they did in free agency, the Giants didn't really have any, oh my God, we got to fill this whole type of need. There wasn't a tremendous sense of urgency. Yes, they needed a franchise quarterback, which Jackson Dart may or may not develop into, but they plugged a lot of holes, if not all the holes, with, at the very least, temporary solutions that are workable, that can give them some success that they haven't had in years past. That allowed them, with this draft class, to take best player available, truly take best player available. There was no forcing of picks at any one spot. And even Shane kind of alluded to that in his draft presser recap, that, he didn't feel like, there was that need was kind of driving, or the other force of driving the selections. They were legitimately able to go best available. And really, if you think about it, folks, that's the best way to build a roster up. That's how you build a winning roster. So that being said, will the Giants have a winning roster? There's still more work to be done. Obviously, we've got the mini camps, we've got the OTAs, which are going to start next month, training camp. We've got to just see how things play out. But I'll tell you what, right now, as I sit here today, things are looking up for the Giants. I'm optimistic, but of course, we'll see how it all plays out. And I'll be right here to bring you everything. All right. So I hope you will stay with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. That's going to do it for today's show. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, spending part of your day with me. And folks, I'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants. So make sure you keep it here all week, actually, because like I said, I'm going to have guests on for you. We're going to be talking draft picks and more. So keep it here, and I'll see you tomorrow, Giant fans.